Okay. Okay. So yesterday we talked about the Docker. We have seen about the Docker installation in Ubuntu, and then we have pulled some Docker images and something, right? Now we have done something like we even started how to run a Docker image also. Okay, but now let's recap or spend a little bit time on that again. So it will be helpful for the to recover what we have discussed here. Okay. Okay, I hope you guys can able to see my screen. I'm starting my 1 minute. So I open my virtual box and then I'm trying to log in. Okay, not this one. 9.82.89.82. Okay, I have logged into my remote machine now. So let's check the Docker, whether the Docker has been installed or not by typing just Docker here. Docker is a client, okay? Docker D is a server, or a Docker D is a daemon, okay? Whenever you see some commands like either Docker or Docker D, you have to tell that if you are using a Docker command, you are using a client. The client is Docker command, okay? The Docker, this is the keyword for that. If it is a server, if you are doing some daemon settings or daemon operations, you would use a Docker D like this, okay? Now let's recap it again. I'll tell you the comparison. If you don't understand the image, let's if you don't understand the image from yesterday's session, let me recap again, or let me retime and reproduce it again here. Okay. So if you just see here, what we do is generally here we have a VM, right? Let's compare how do we deal with the VM and Docker here. Okay. In case of VM, what we do is we will be just create a VM. Okay. Create a VM, right? Like, I open a virtual box, click on this and give all the information and then configure here. Okay. So in case of a Docker, you would, I mean to say, Docker image here. Okay. You would build an image. Okay. Build an image. Here you would create an image. Okay. How do you create a VM? You required ISO file. You required a network settings. Okay. You required ISO settings. And what else? Yeah, basic necessary, all the config you require. Okay, this is one. But in case of building a Docker image, right? What you required is you required some base OS. I mean, you required basically a Docker file, basically. Like while creating a VM, what you do is generally you would just create or you would download ISO file, you would do configuration, you would do network creation and all. Here also, while building or in order to build an image, you required a one file called Docker file. Okay. Like if you take an example of config, right, you have something called what is the OS name, what is exactly what type of architect it is, a 64-bit or 32-bit, how much RAM, what is the CPU size, and everything you have to give. Similarly, in a Docker file also, you have to mention something called instructions. Instructions is nothing like, instructions are like run, CMD, entry point. There are some keywords in a Docker file. Run, CMD, entry point. There are a lot of things here. Okay. Now, after creating a VM, what you do is you will log into the VM, right? I mean, no. Before login to the VM, you will run a VM, or basically you will start a VM. Okay. In case of a Docker image, what you do is you will run a image. You will run an image using a Docker run command. Here, you will just go to this UI and then just start or show something like this. Start, that's it. Right here, that is what it happened. Okay. Here, after running or after starting a VM, what you do is you will log into the VM, right? How do you log in? If it is UI enabled, you just go and then click on something like this and then do all the operations like this. Is a simple way. Here also, if you want to work in inside a image, I mean, so basically here when you start an VM, what will happen is the output is VM is up and running. Okay. Here, when you run an image, one thing will be created that is called container. Container you will get as an output here. Here, when you would be logging into the VM, but in the Docker image concept, you will enter into the container, not an image, because image is not a running thing. Image is a static one. Okay. Container is a running instance of an image. Sorry, container is an image, running instance of an image. Okay. Here you will log into the enter or log into the container. Here you will directly log into the VM. How do you log in or enter to the container? By using a Docker exec command -it and the image name, something like that. There is a syntax here. Okay. After running a VM, what you do is, after logging into the VM, what you do is you do your operations. Operations could be mkdir or whatever the operations, the Linux command that you do execute, right? Here is also the same. After logging into the VM, what will happen is you will also do some operations. That could be anything. If it is a Linux OS, I mean Linux Ubuntu based OS, you do the same thing in both either VM or a Docker image here. Now, here after doing some operations, don't need to save. Here, if you do any changes inside a container, save the changes inside a container. For that, you would use a Docker commit. Okay, this is one thing. And after that, what you do is you stop the VM. Here also stop the container. For that, you would use a Docker stop container ID. This is the some major difference between the VM and Docker image. I mean, this is not, I could say, you won't find it anywhere, but still, why I have mentioned this one is when you compare with how we are doing with the VM and then how we are doing with the Docker image, right? If you compare those scenarios, you will easily understand some differences and you will easily do some things here. Okay, let's put all the Docker images related containers here. Okay, now let's talk each of these in internal parts of it. Okay, now is it clear, guys? I want a confirmation. Is it clear before going ahead?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now, when you talk about the build, what do you mean by a build here? In order to build, you require some Docker file. I mean, we will go in depth, but not now. Just remember, if we want to build any image, you require a Docker file. You need to write a Docker file. Okay. Otherwise, if there are any already images are existed, I mean, if already images are presented or published, right? What you do is you will just use it. For that, you don't require a image. Meaning, for example, yesterday we have pulled something called Ubuntu. This image we already pulled it because someone has already written some Docker file. By using this Docker file, they build an image. They have mentioned the name as a Ubuntu here. So we are directly utilizing their output. That is nothing but a Docker pull Ubuntu. Meaning we don't require a Docker file for the Ubuntu image because image is already been existed. Why do we write a Docker file? In order to create an image. Okay, since like this, there are a lot of images here in Linux. These are already pre-configured by their companies, meaning Nginx. Of course, something wrong here. Postgres is another image. There is a lot of Jenkins is another image. So meaning they have how they have published, they have a Docker file. They have mentioned how to build the Ubuntu image, Jenkins image, Postgres image, and everything. And then you are directly pulling this one. Now, similarly, if we have something called XYZ and XYZ app, you need to Dockerize or you want to publish a Docker image for your XYZ app. What you do is you will write a Docker file. Inside a Docker file, you will mention all the commands related Docker file and then XYZ code. For example, XYZ is a Maven based one. I hope you know how to create a package in a Maven. There is some command called, this is a Java project, for example, and this is MVN based. If we something like a clean install package, right? These are the when you do MVN package, it will generate a one jar file under the target XYZ XYZ jar, right? So this is how you build your application. That application could be a Java. Now inside a Docker file, you will mention something called entry point or any of the some of the commands, and you would target slash or not like entry point. Of course there is something called copy also. What does it do is it will copy the XYZ dot tar to some directory, for example, root one. So it will copy. So ultimately, you created your Docker file. And then by using your Docker file, what you do is you will build this. After building your Docker file, you will get a XYZ image. Like this, all these images has been published. This is nothing but a Dockerizing your application. Okay, we will do a practical of this part also, but since we have talked about this build concept, we just mentioned of all this stuff. Okay, now let's start. Is it clear, guys? I'll show you the few examples of here. Docker image, Docker file for Jenkins. First, let me show you. See, this is a Jenkins image. Docker. This is a Jenkins image, which we just now talked here, Jenkins. If you want to pull this image into your local repository, you just need to use this command called Docker Jenkins. Now let's check whether do I have the Docker images of Jenkins. I do not have any Docker image of Jenkins. So I'm just pulling this. So it is downloading from a local remote repository to here itself. Okay, now the tags are 2.6.0, 2.60.2, something like this. And if we want to run, how to run this particular Docker image, what it is saying, from a daemon manifest for Jenkins latest is not found. So you have to specify there is no latest. So what you do is 2.60.2.60. .60.3 here. Let's see with the, yeah, it's pulling all the Docker related images. Okay. Yeah, this is how they publish their own Docker image. Okay. Simply, right? We'll talk about how to run this one when we talk about how to do this. But they have already built this image, right? Let's see how the Docker file for this Jenkins server. Let's see if we found it. Generally, they won't publish their definition. How do they do that? Of course, even if you are working in a company and if someone asks you to write a Dockerizing your application, you won't, even though if you write it, you won't publish it to publicly, right? So similarly, they won't also publish it. There is something called Docker file. The file name itself is a Docker file. How to build and not using a document. Okay, but fine, let's see this. See, if you see here, they have created some Docker file and they have taken, they have some keywords in it. They have some keywords in it. Yum install, all the stuff, right? Then downloading the Jenkins repo and then importing the key and then yum install Jenkins. And then finally, they are configuring the Jenkins user under the sudoers file. And then they're finally starting the Jenkins server in the foreground mode. And then they are just displaying the initial password and finally exposing the 8080. Right? I mean, if you see here, all the commands they have run, we already done it. If you remember, while installing the Jenkins, we have followed a couple of steps, right? By using a DigitalOcean documentation. They have all combined together and then put it in one file with the run, cmd, expose, and different commands of the keywords of a Docker file. And then they are telling it as a Docker file. Simple thing. Whatever you are executing manual commands, you put it in a Docker file. The file is called a Docker file here. Okay, the file name, it should be a Docker file. Of course, you can create a another Docker file with another name, but while building, you have to specify what is the file name. If you write your all commands in a Docker file, you don't need to explicitly mention what is your file name. But if you change something, if you put your Docker instructions in some other file, you're required to specify what is exactly the file name. This is a definition how a Docker file looks like, and we will also create it. Okay. See, this is still going on. Yeah, because of the internet speed and all. Let's cancel this. We will use the simple one. Okay. Now let's talk about, okay, Nginx. Let me do one thing. Docker pull Nginx. IMX. Let's assume this is also small in size. Okay. Now we have just seen the build part of it. Now the next thing is run a image. When you run an image, you would get a container. Okay. Let's see. Here if you remember, we have seen how to run a, for example, if your image is a Jenkins, they would publish the commands how to run that image you using Docker run command. And they are saying you have to expose these ports This is how they have built it. If you want to run my image, you have to expose this. Otherwise, you can't able to access my Jenkins server. This is how they build it. So meaning they have to tell how to use their image. Even if you Dockerize your application, you have to publish a one README document how to use your Docker image. Why? Because they don't know how to run this image, right? What are the parameters, whether it is expecting any arguments or any volumes or any networks, any port number need to be exposed. So they required to tell, like they required to know in order to run that particular image, right? So similarly, by using this Docker run command, you would run a image. After running an image, you would get a one container. Okay. For example, if you take here, in order to use the Jenkins images, you have to use the port forwarding of 8080 and 5000, 500, 500. This is how they would be running. And apart from that, they are also providing couple of other parameters, like their volumes. We will talk about the volumes here. Volumes is basically if you see here, volume is basically, for example, if you in a OS, right, in a VM, when you do operations, it will automatically save it in the hard disk, right? If you do something, it will save it in the same hard disk. Even if you stop it and then come back again, if you start again, it will still show you because it's already saved in a hard disk. But in case of a Docker, I mean, in case of a container, it won't save you the data because container is a stateless. Stateless means it does not have a capacity to hold some data, or it does not persist the data at all. That is called a stateless. Stateful means it can have a capability of storing the state of information. I mean, state of a particular data, meaning it has a capability of storing the information. Container is a stateless, meaning it cannot hold the data. For example, if you start a Postgres database container, Postgres is one of the database, or MySQL, if you take any of the database, or Oracle, or any of the database container, basically the main purpose of the database is to store the data in the SQL format. Okay, basic thing is it will store it. But if you start a container, it does not hold the data. At that time, all these Docker images required to attach a volume. Volume means you are telling to your container saying that, hey, please use my local volume as your volume. Meaning, whatever the data it is going to store, it will be stored in the local volume. How it will do? This is the syntax here. So basically, Docker, first thing is Docker run image name. Okay, this is the basic syntax to run an image. If image required any parameters like hyphen port means, for example, 80808080. If you see means this particular image is something running on 8080 port, and you want to do port forwarding or port binding, you have to use a hyphen p, which means do a port forwarding. Okay, now let's see, the image has been pulled here. Let's see the syntax of Docker run command here. Let's see the port here. There are a lot of stuffs, right? Expose a port. Basically, you would use a port forwarding called expose a list of the ports. Meaning, for example, if we want to know Docker help, I'll tell you, I'll just show you the hyphen p meaning here. Docker port mapping. Docker PS, you would get something like this. Okay, I'll just show you that as well. Just a moment. Now we just talked about this guy, right? So let's see how to run a Nginx image. If I don't know, you have to how to run it. Docker Nginx run. Okay, Nginx is the official Docker image is this one. And if you want to pull this, this is the command. And if they have mentioned something like this, yeah, see this? They are saying Docker run. You have to attach two things. Volume. See this? If you want to use this Nginx image, you have to attach this volume. Okay, so if you see here, even if you don't, I mean, even exposing ports also here. They are exposing the ports here. Let's put this, then we will see here. Let's take an example here. Docker run and -p 8080 and Nginx. What does it mean is, hey, run this Nginx image. While running this image, please do port forwarding from 80 to 8080, meaning when Nginx is a two things. It is a proxy server as well as it is a load balancer. Sometimes it will use as a web server also. It has a three capabilities. So it will expose, it will run on a, by default, Nginx will run on a 80 port. So what you are saying is, when you run this Nginx image, please do port forwarding from 80 to 8080 to my host. The right side, the right side port number represents the container port mapping, container port, and the left side port represents the host port. Okay, meaning, for example, let me put it this way. This is my VM. Inside a VM, when I run Docker, when I run this image, it will create a container. Inside a container, there is a port running called, there is a service running called Nginx on the port 8080. Okay. If you want to access that website or that particular server inside a container, you can't able to access. That is for sure, because when you create a container will create in a different network. Different network means which is in a NAT network. You can't able to access outside of that entire container from within that. What you need to do is you have to expose this particular port number. You have to port mapping of 80, which is inside a container, to 8080. If you tell like, sir, why should we use a 8080? Yeah, you can change 9000 or some other port, anything, but you can't change the port of 80 because Nginx is by default running on a 80 port. But if Nginx is running on 9000 port, you can change it to 9000. But what you have to bind with the whatever they have mentioned here. Okay, but you can change on the left side, which has been this one. Okay, I hope you understand. Now let's try run this, and then we will talk about other parts also here. Okay, now Docker run -p 8080 of my local host of 280 port, which is running inside a container Nginx. See, it's already in use. It is saying Docker PS. It's already in using. There is something which is already running in my 8080 port. Let's see what is running inside my. See, something is running on a 8080 port. That's why it is saying I can't able to attach, or I can't able to attach to 8080 port because bind address is already in use. So what I do is, instead of choosing 8080, I'll put 9000. So yeah, see. So if you see, it is started the Nginx. Now let's try to access this Nginx server from a outside of the Docker. My local host machine is, my VM IP address is 192.168.89.82 colon 9000. See, this page is coming from inside a container. Okay. Now, if you want to change this content, right? What initially they are saying, see this, you attach some volume, like attach some content, like whatever the content that you want to present, but represent this file. So it will display that's it. That is what it is built. Now we have just seen, two things we have to learn here. When we are accessing this, we are getting a live logs, okay? Meaning when you start a container, it is running in a foreground. Foreground means it is running in front of us. That too, if you close this, it will automatically get stopped here. If you want to run in a backend or background mode, what you do is, before image name, you just need to use a -d. So it will run in a background mode. See this? Now let's check here. It is up to, see here, 0.0 represents your local host to 980 TCP. Okay. Now let's check whether this is still up or not. See, this is still up. Okay. Now this is one way of doing it. What we have just learned is, we attached same command, but in a background mode here. Okay. Now next thing is, we just used -p. -p is for the port mapping. The port mapping is nothing but, if you want to, let's try this one. This is a container ID. If you see here, there is a container ID, image, command, creator, status, and ports. Finally, the container name of this one. Okay. Meaning, whenever you start a container, it will automatically create all this information. Okay. Now, let's create another container with a different name. Let's go to the official page and see what they are doing. If you want to use something called name some Nginx, what I do is docker ps. Now what I do is, since 9001 port is already binded, I'll use a 9001 for another container. I'll give a container name is Narendra Nginx. Now let's check what does it happen. No, it should have something called, 1 minute, docker psa hyphen. It is exited 12 seconds ago because of something. Okay. Now what I'll do is, instead of here, see, they have given hyphen name, hyphen name. See, there is a -n Nginx. You have to use the hyphen name in front of this. So let's access the same thing in another port. 190.160. Instead of 9000, I'll give a 9001 here. So you just mention hyphen name to this one. Okay. You just given a hyphen name Nginx. Now let me clear this. Okay. Now let's see what are all things you can do. Docker run I'll just save these points. Okay. Now let's see what are other things. Here, there is another thing, let's call volume. As I mentioned earlier, if you see here, there is a something called volume, meaning by default, it has been rendering the content of HTML file, which is inside of this one. Okay. Now let's see how to log in inside a container. Now we just have seen how to run an image. Okay. And with the different options, but there are a lot of things we have to know along with hyphen p hyphen we have to add some more thing, but I'll come back here again. But now let's see how to enter into a Docker container. Okay. When you run an image, you should stop using image. Whenever you started, you have to start representing as a container, meaning now you are going to see how to log in inside a container or how to enter inside a container. Okay. There is a command called docker exec -et image name and the program that you want to enter. This is the command that you have to give it. Or sorry, it is a container ID, not an image ID. Container ID, because container, whenever you start an image, it will create a container. You would log in inside a container and then you do a lot of stuff here. Now let's check how many containers are running here. If you want to see the how many containers are actually running Docker PS, which is nothing but a Docker processes. If you want to see the previous all the processes which are in exist state or running state, you would use a hyphen A here. Okay. Now I want to log in inside this container. What I do is docker exec -it, which means an interactive mode. The container ID is this one, or you can represent using a name also. You can represent either container name with the container name or container ID. Always user practice is mostly F8 container ID D1. You don't need to enter all these digits, just first 5 digits is enough. When you run this container, please please give an entry point as a bash. Bash means a terminal. See, we have seen, we have entered this inside of it, right? Now you are inside a container. Now let's check what are there inside a container. Everything as like OS1, meaning when you see when you create a VM, right? What will happen is it will have a OS libraries, right? OS libs, right? And of its own, meaning it won't depending on base OS or host OS. But in case of a Docker image, it will have a OS libs, but it will be depends on host OS. That is where main beauty of the Docker image, because it is a lightweight. Why lightweight? Because it won't have its own. It is depending on the host OS libraries. That's why you would see the less one. But whatever the VM can do, Docker image is also capable of doing it. But OS contains entire all the libraries, whatever is been required. Okay. For example, 5 GB if you take, but Docker image contains MBs only, meaning it will have only the lightweight, whatever is required for in order to run an Nginx server, it will be there. But if you take a VM, if you want to run a Docker image of engine, if you want to install the image of if you want to install Nginx, you require a lot of stuff. You will be ending up a lot of things. So that's why the image, the VM size will be huge. But in case of a Docker image, it will contains only what it has been required. Okay, meaning uh, the Docker image of Nginx does not require a Java, does not require a PHP, does not require a PostgreSQL or DevTools or any of other things. But in case of a OS of a VM, which if we install Nginx, it contains a Java, libDevTools, and other stuff. That's why it is a heavy 8 also here. Okay, that's why you would see a less information here, but all are sharing with your base OS, meaning my for this container, my base OS is VM. Okay, I hope you understand. Now you are inside a container. See, if you see the list, this is one thing. And now let's check. You won't find all the commands easily because Docker will maintain very lightweight. It contains only the information whatever it has been required here. Okay, so that's why you won't find all the information part of here. Now we have seen how to how to log in inside a container by using a docker exec-i and all that stuff. Okay, now let's come back. I mean, now we want to check one thing. By default, this is the file, right? Now let's check. Now let's check whether this file is existed inside a container or not. See, by default, index.html. Okay, see, this is the everything. Thank you for using Nginx. And let's see, this is the same thing or not. Yeah, this is the content of it. Welcome Nginx and all. So this is what it has been doing it now. Now, what I do is I'll follow this one. I'll attach a volume which is inside my VM and then point it to this particular folder so it can render the content from this folder instead of this folder. Okay, now let me put it in a simple way here. Here, when you see -v means a volume, please attach volume of left side, which is mean host OS, host volume, to container volume. Okay, so this is the best thing, meaning, so till now if you don't attach any of the volumes, it is rendering the content inside of this one. Now once you attach the volume, it will use this one instead of using this. I hope you understand what I'm saying. And if you ask me after this one, read only, don't write it. Just use this volume. For example, I'll put it in this way. Where I'm in currently, I'm inside I'm just logging from inside a container. See, I just logged in, still it is running here. Okay, now I'm here, right? Now let me create a folder called dv. Okay, now let me go to the dv right here. So please use in the current directory of /dv folder as your container volume of under user share nginx /html. Only read only purpose. If you don't give read only, you can give a read write and execute also. But if you don't give anything, it has everything. Since this guy is saying read only, just give read only here. So this is one thing. Now let's construct our thing now here. Docker run -- name use nginx volume, use a port number, do a port 4199902 of 80-d nginx inx. Now let's pass -v also here. Okay, now inside of this it required some index.html. Let's index.html. index.html. Hello, this is Docker class. Okay. Now this is the content inside this one. Okay. Now let's run this and then see what it is doing it here. Now, okay. Now Docker PS. See, ng volume is running, which is export to 9024. Now let's navigate 9000. Forbidden. Forbidden means it is not able to read properly. 403, it's not able to read properly here. Now let's check. See, it does not have a execute permission. So let me give a execution permissions for this and then check. Okay, it has a, let me give a 777. So if you see here, the owner has a read write execute, the group has read write execute, but the third party does not have a write permission. But yeah, of course, it is fine. We don't need to give. Now let's, okay. Now what we should do is we have to either I can restart this image, I can kill this container and then spin up another container with the same name, or I can spin up another container. Now let me stop the container of, you can use either container name or container ID. Now I'm going to stop this. Okay. Now I'm going to remove this container also. If we don't remove, what will happen is it will tell you, hey, already there is a container called nga volume. So you should use another volume. I mean, another container name. That's what it will tell you. Okay. So that's why I'm going to give you. Why? Because I'm going to start the another container with the same name, meaning same command, ng volume. Seconds up, it was gone, and the volume name is fine. Now let's check and see. Okay, nginx is forbidden. Now let's check what are the reason. Nginx forbidden, docker volume path, volume mount. So this is a nginx related troubleshooting. Okay, not a related one. See, simply this guy is saying use read only hyphen port, and this is the one. This guy is saying fine, but the next step should be something. Check the permissions of these files in this folder. They should be read, write, read access. The index file in the folder has a read, write, read authority. Could you please think of anything else I need to check? Last time I checked this guy and this. If it's an empty LCL, there's a lot of stuff. dvan ls hyphen data. Name this one, index.html, permission denied. Rem, jed. It works with the hyphen jed suffix bind mounting. Okay. So now let's do the same thing. I'm going to stop my previous container and then I'm going to remove this. And then I'll try this. Instead of read only, I'll just give a jed here. Looks like caps jed. Now let me check. Okay, nothing is working. Okay. So let me do one thing. I don't give anything here. So what I'll do is I'm going to create another container. Okay, bind 2 is already been presented, right? 3, volume 2 here. Okay, similar one. So there is some problem with the nginx binding of this also here. most probably the permissions which we were been attached here. Oh my God, I guess, see, I'm inside here. Let's check the content inside a container. Okay. Why DB folder got created here also? Okay. Okay. What I'm gonna do is cd db. Here I'll create another index called nano. I mean, if you see here, I was running in somewhere and saying that under db there is a file called index.html. Use that, but internally it does not have. Let me try this index.html. See, this guy is saying it's not writable. Why? Because it is been owned by root user. Okay. Now what I'll do is let me do plus x dv, meaning the volume that you are going to mount should have all the permissions also here. Okay, under the dv, the owner should be chmod, change the mode -r, learner colon learner, yeah, to dv chmod -r ler, yeah, ler chmod -r. Change the mode, right? I mean, I want change the ownership. Ch1 operation is not formatted. I'll use a sudo. Now let's check the owner of it. Yeah, the owner got changed. Now inside a db dot index, I'm gonna create index.html, and now I'm able to write here something. Now let me check the permissions inside this file. Yeah, it does not have an executor. Now let me rerun this chmod -r 777 dv folder. So I'll have a read write execute. Now from here onwards, I'll use the same command called docker run. If you see here, if I give dot means current directory. In the current directory, there is a folder called dev. Please mount that. That is what it has been showing here. Now what I'll do is I'll change the port number and name here. Of course, you can stop and remove the previous things, but still, I don't want to, I mean, I'm just skipping that part. Now what I'm going to do is my container name is ng volume 3, exposing 9000 port in a host mission and mounting the volume of in the current directory of dv. I mean, in the current directory, there is a folder called dv. Please use or please mount this folder to this particular folder in the inside a container. Okay, now let's see. Okay, docker ps nginx volume 3 9000 port. Now let's check. Hopefully, okay. See, this has come. Earlier, it was not able to properly render the data from that. I mean, mount is fine, but mount does not have a mounted directory, does not have a file. Now, what does it happen is here, it is you have mounted your local volume to container volume, because container does not have a capability of storing the data, because when you stop a container, it does not store any of the data. That's why you would use a mounting a volume using a -v command to store or to persist the data of a container. Okay, we have used this one, and now let's go again and then see what else are been here. We have used a -d for running a background mode, -p for exposing the port, and what else? See, these guys, we have used a name, we have used the volume, we have used the -d, right? So we have used all the stuff here. Okay. Yeah, these are all the some more things here. See, yeah, -v, -pwd means present working directory. Under the present working directory, there is something called nginx.conf. Use that as a nginx config. So something they have done a lot of stuff like this. Okay, now we have seen all this, how to start a container, how to run a container, and everything. Now next thing is how to log in inside a container also we have seen. Now let's do the some operations here, meaning let's go inside a container. What is the command to do that? So exec, this is a command, this is the container id. The container id, now I'll be going inside a volume 3. Now I'm inside here, and let's see what I do is I'll create a va is also not there, echo. This is the file, this is this file, there is something 6.txt. 6.txt I just created. Now what I've done is I've just exited here, and then let's docker ps, let's stop the container of in which container we have logged in and then created this file. We just we are going to stop it and start it again, and let's see if the file is existed or not here. Volume 3, and then we'll start again of. Okay, now let's exe to that one, and then check whether do we have the sys.txt. Okay, now it is a saving the data, but when you remove the container, right, meaning this, for example, what I just mentioned, if you see here, we have used the image called nginx. Let me put it in an mode. We have used an image called container, image called nginx. From nginx, we have created almost 4 containers. Nginx volume 1, nginx volume 2, nginx volume 3, and all the stuff like this. Okay, here is the one. See, almost five containers we have just done. Okay, now what you just have done is, in the 5 containers, into one container you have done some changes. Okay, that is like creating a file called sys.txt or anything. Now whatever the changes that you have done, it does not store the data inside an image. If you see here, you have created a 5 containers from a same image. If you done some changes in a container, it won't reflect in the image itself. It will be still there in the inside this container only, and even at least even it did not reflect in any of other containers. Or if you spin up another 6th container, whatever the saved the data that you do have under the container 4, it won't reflect in the newly going to create a container also, meaning this is called a statelet. You are doing some operations on the instance of an image that won't store the data. If you want to save this data inside the image itself, what you need to do is you have to use something called docker commit. So what does it mean is, you have created a text, right? After coming out of this container, what you do is docker commit the container id, then it will reflect inside a image. Your image is going to change the definition, because from now onwards, whatever the after committing your image or after committing your container changes, whatever and next, if you start a 7th container, The seventh container is going to have that change. And remaining previously, whatever the containers it was started, right? These were not being reflected, even though if you committed, because these are already been started before committing this one. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Please let me know if you are able to understand or not here. This is somewhat, I mean, so this one I'm talking about a do operation and save. These 2 points we'll do practically also. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Please let me know if you have any questions. We will continue from tomorrow again with the same point here, and then we will close the Docker related commands. And the next one is we will use the I mean, now we have seen a volume ports also. Now what we do is we will talk about the network, how to create a network, meaning you have just created a 5 containers, right? These 5 containers is not able to communicate each one, either this or this or this. Nothing was able to communicate to each other. What you are going to do is you are going to create a network. Inside a network you are going to attach, or you are going to create that running containers, or going to create a new containers, right? That you will be running inside this network. So that is where generally where does it will help is when you start what do you say, when you want to bring up entire application which has one database, one application, and all the stuff, right? What you do is you will create a network inside a Docker, I mean using a Docker. Within the Docker you will create a, or you will spin up a containers from an image. So these two will be communicate each other. One can be web server, one can be database server. In a web server you can expose some ports, others can able to access the data. Okay, others can able to access your web server. So whatever the data it is storing, you can, I mean, you can do a lot of stuff here. So this is why we need to create, I mean, this is why we require a network. These networks also, there are different types like overlay, bridge, and all. We will talk about tomorrow. Okay, this is it from today, guys. Let's meet tomorrow and let me know if you have any questions. I want a confirmation from everyone. Is it clear? Okay, right. Thanks, Naveen. Good. Um, okay, right. Cool. Please do practice all this. Please rewatch this video if you don't understand, but it is very important. Majorly, you would need to be focused on the what are the commands related to the container, what are the commands related to the image, what are the commands related to the debugging. You have to understand these 3 areas. You would be easily understand, and these are the areas interviewer will be expecting you to talk about the Docker, how to deal with that, and troubleshooting part. Okay, that's it, guys, from my side.